I just love that you moved, into this broader practice of functional medicine. But what really brought you there? What took you there?
Yeah. In 2007, I was in my medical practice for 5 years, and I had 3 children at that time, and they were all sick and plagued with chronic disease. And I took the 3-ring circus to the doctor one day, and I was like, I lined up the 3 ducklings, and I'm like, what's happening here? Why aren't there so many chronic medications? My little one couldn't walk out on an Easter egg hunt because his eyes would swell shut. His body would be covered in hives, and he would rip his skin off on the ground crying because he was so uncomfortable. My daughter had asthma, eczema, seasonal allergies, recurrent ear infection, constipation. My middle child had snot, like the kind of boogers. You're not even allowed to walk out of the house these days. He was disgusting. Anyway, so then when we got there, so for the little one, the doctor said, and I quote, "We have run out of medication. The only next option is allergy shots." He was 2 years old.
Wow.
For my daughter, they're like, oh, well, her inhaled steroids work for asthma, topical steroids work for eczema, Zyrtex controlling her seasonal allergies. She will outgrow her ear infections as you do. And her constipation is being controlled with daily Miralax. By the time we got to my middle one and his snot and his ADHD and all that, I like stopped paying attention. I'm like, right, we're not getting anywhere. And I walked out of that office. I felt ignored. I felt like a crazy person. I felt dismissed. I didn't feel like anyone was listening to what I was saying. And it was that time that, I'm just speak for mamas because I'm a mama, but like mamas are born with this like mama warrior that sometimes sleeps, then she wakes up, and when she wakes up, watch out. And she woke up and was like, wait, what? The rest of these children's story is chronic meds for life and more meds. And even as a traditionally trained doctor, I couldn't accept that as the answer. So I was like, I don't know what my next step is. But my mama warrior was like, listen, these children's story is going to end differently. They are going to be off these medications, and they're going to be the example by which other families are going to change their life. I don't know how we're going to get there, but that's the vision. So next week, a week later, I went to the kids' school. It was an elementary school talk on nutrition, and I always would go to support the school. And I walked in with like, I know, because I'm a pediatrician, what she's going to say, And, but it was on that Tuesday, 7:30 in the morning, freezing my butt in a first grader's classroom. The fog lifted, and I realized the root cause of my children's illness. All she talked about was sugar. And I thought I was feeding my kids great because they had strawberries at lunch and they had broccoli at dinner. I never looked at how many grams of sugar I would put into their breakfast and their lunch and their dinner. And so I came home that night from clinic in my stilettos, and I went into the pantry and I threw out the cinnamon toast crunch and Lucky Charms and toaster strudels and chicken nuggets and juice boxes. You name a garbage, my kids were eating it because I didn't see the correlation between food and their health. And that's when I became an outcast in my family. My husband was an orthopedic surgeon. He was like, what's food have to do with it? So he and I started fighting, and we fought over the next 5 years over food. My family and friends thought I lost my mind. My medical partners were, where's the evidence? I'm like, it's 2007, people. It wasn't that much Google. But it couldn't be wrong to get rid of processed foods and replace it with fruits and vegetables. I just couldn't see the wrong. So as you do as a mama warrior, despite the naysayers, just kept on going. And over the next 5 years, my kids stopped needing antibiotics, stopped needing steroids. They came off medication. My middle child never needed ADHD meds. We never needed allergy shots. By 2016, my husband and I were burned out with medicine, so we moved to New Zealand, where we took the children. We had no medical insurance, no medications, no doctors, and my children thrived. They climbed the highest mountains, and yes, we bungee jumped off all the bridges.
Nice.
And that's what I realized what it looks like to come back from chronic disease.
So sugar. And of course, we're going to unpack what else may have been part and parcel to that, because rarely any condition is a single needle in a haystack. Sounds like that was the largest contributing factor, and it often is. And I think This is the misconception, is when, your husband, who's an orthopod, and any medical doctor, any conventional practitioner learns first in school the biochemistry of the body, and without sugar, we don't live, we die. And our brain needs sugar and every part. But the toxins in the dose, right, and the type, what does that mean? First of all, and also how exactly is sugar contributing to disease?
Right. So it's not right. We need the brain utilizes sugar as its main energy source. So we're not saying that don't eat carbs. It is the added sugar that is the problem. Over 150 years ago, we were eating about 1 teaspoon of sugar a day, maybe. We are now at 24 teaspoons per day at a minimum.
Yeah.
And it's the toxic load. And what happens when we do a lot of sugar, one of the things goes right to the brain. You know what happens when we have a lot of sugar in the brain? The brain shrinks. And it's been looked at by Harvard, by Stanford. When we have too much sugar, too high glycemic load in the brain shrinks. Another thing is that when we eat a lot of sugar, then within 30 to 45 minutes, the insulin has already risen and we have a massive sugar drop. And here we go with focus issues, inattention, behavior problems, which was my middle child who was chewing pencils underneath his chair and climbing flagpoles. I like to demonstrate it in real time, everyone, just want to show you exactly how it's done. And then on top of that, when I was in residency, circa 1999, there was no such thing as type 2 diabetes in children. That did not exist. There were zero cases. We're now 1 in 6. And a scary study by the CDC says that children born after 2000, 1 in 3 are expected to have type 2 diabetes.
Yeah. So if we look at big numbers, I like to look at the 30, 40 years. So 40 years in the U.S., Journal of American Medicine, 2007, 1 in 50 children had some sort of chronic medical condition, meaning under the care of a doctor on medication, childhood and life. 1 in 50. 2007, we'd gone to 1 in 5. And today we're 1 in 3 of all these different disorders, including the diabetes.
And the CDC predicts in the next 1 to 2 years is going to be 1 in 1, which is 100% of our children.
Just
are
so
gonna have
bonkers how this is flipped. This, type 2 used to be late onset, type 1 early. Now we've got LADA, and so type 1 is later, and then type 2 or the juveniles later. Type 2 is now early with the obesity epidemic. I'm not fact-checking you. You're preaching to the converted here. We just like to present the evidence when and if somebody says something specific, because some of these things are hard to believe for a lot of folks that are new to this.